Ryuzaki.
Huh? Welcome!
Welcome back, everyone. Episode 18, Ally. So the episode starts off at the task force's new base of operations. There's nothing all that exceptional about this opening sequence. It's really just there to showcase the new place, which I will admit looks pretty cool. But yeah, heading back outside, we get to watch Aizawa make his way through the new security features, which at first glance seems like a lot, especially given the fact that for the better part of a year, they were just working out of hotels, which I imagine had practically no security. Like now they've got fingerprint scanners, retinal scanners, surveillance cameras, and a full body metal detector. But it seems like they're still working out the kinks on that last one.
How's this, huh?
And while I thought it seemed a bit unnecessary to have all of this, especially considering they were doing just fine without it, I also kind of understand the desire for more security in general. Because given Kira's ability to control people's actions before death, and given the task force's lack of understanding on how exactly that works, they could very well be under the impression that Kira could just have someone roll up on them and kill them. Obviously, we know that's not an option given what we've learned from the rules, but regardless, I could still see them wanting to prepare for such a situation. Anyway, one more thing before we move on. There's this moment showing Watari in the control hub for the building, and whew, this setup is crazy. I thought I had a lot going on with my laptop and 2 monitors, but damn, Watts, you're over here like you're literally chilling in the Batcave. But anyway, after a few hiccups with the metal detector, Aizawa finally meets up with the chief and Matsuda.
Good morning.
And as he walks over to them, the chief is quick to notice the bandage on Aizawa's forehead, to which Aizawa says,
"Oh, this? I had a little fight with my wife."
Which, right off the bat, my guy, are you okay? Like, is your wife hitting you? Like, all jokes aside, it's very interesting to me that he just casually throws that out there and no one really says anything about it. Like, he goes on to explain that the fight stemmed from the fact that he's working a lot and not spending time with his young daughter, with him kind of using it as an excuse to justify whatever it is that happened. And instead of anyone coming to his defense, it's instead met with the chief saying,
Yes, it's probably best if you sleep at home.
And Matsuda following it up with,
"Well, you're gonna be missing out. The rooms in this place are amazing."
which is just, okay, that's all y'all gotta say? Whatever. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that I believe that Aizawa is being abused by his wife or anything. I think it was just meant to visually allude to the problems that exist in his marriage, as well as foreshadow things to come in this episode. But regardless, it just seems odd to me how quickly it was just kind of dismissed by both of them. Anyway, Matsuda suggests that Aizawa move his family into the building, to which Aizawa responds by saying,
Yeah, that's easy for you to say as a bachelor.
and he has a point. I could totally understand having that mindset at 25 or 26. Like, wait, I get a whole floor to myself in this dope-ass building? And did you say, rent-free?
Fuck yeah!
But the idea of moving my wife and my young children in here, one of whom's a baby, just,
No.
Anyway, Aizawa asks where everyone else is, and Matsuda tells him that they're on a date in Misa's room. So we transition there, and Misa just does not look amused.
Man, this has got to be the lamest date I've ever been on.
And that's fair. I can't say that I imagine Ryuzaki would be all that great of a wingman. But yeah, Ryuzaki and Misa go back and forth regarding him being there for her and Light's date, with her basically saying, "You need to leave!" and him responding with,
I'm good.
The conversation only really takes a turn when Light interjects, claiming Ryuzaki seems like he's unmotivated.
Not motivated. You're right. Actually, I'm depressed.
And while Light doesn't seem to understand why he'd be feeling that way, I totally get it. I mean, Ryuzaki had spent the better part of a year honing in on Light as a suspect, his main suspect. I mean, before Light volunteered to be incarcerated, Ryuzaki had old boy on the ropes. He was going to town on him, to the point where Light was almost ready to just give in. But now it just seems like all of that was pointless. A substantial waste of time on what ultimately amounted to, a 14-day reprieve on killings? Which even then was ultimately undone, as 15 days worth of killings were carried out all at once when Kira came back from vacation or whatever. So in a lot of ways, for him, it was just a waste of half a year. That's depressing. And I'd argue that it's even more depressing for someone like Ryuzaki because, I mean, he's L. Y'all remember L, right?
He's the best of the best.
L is amazing.
If Ryuzaki is L, then it's safe to say that he's the world's best detective.
He's tackled the most difficult cases, solving all of them. He's never been wrong.
Like, do you know how much of an ego that has to give someone to constantly have the fact that you're always right reiterated to you? Just being validated nonstop, only for public opinion to suddenly sway, and now you look like a fool. That's depressing. But wait, there's more. As Ryuzaki goes on to explain,
I can only conclude that Kira's power passes between people.
and if that's the case, it's basically like, what are we even doing here? I mean, we have to look at it from their perspective, removing all knowledge we have regarding the Death Note and how it works, because they don't have any of that information. I mean, as we saw in the previous episode, they're working under the assumption that it's as simple as wishing death upon a person. And if that's the case, and if in addition to that, this power can also just be passed from person to person, then how would you even begin to tackle this? I mean, what good is there in catching Kira if Kira can then just immediately jump to puppeteering someone else? And hell, what do you do with the person who was being controlled? If Kira's power has left them and they have no recollection of ever having it or using it, do you still execute them? Or do you put them in jail for the rest of their lives? Or do you just let them go because they literally have no idea what they've done? How much accountability should they have over their actions if they were being influenced by this entity known as Kira? And yes, I know that these two have always had their own agency and made their own choices, but remember, we can't utilize the knowledge that we already have as a result of following Light and Misa. For all we know, they were just victims of Kira this entire time, no more culpable than anyone else who was being controlled. It's so much to consider, too much, one might say, and that's not even factoring in the biggest question of all, which is, does Kira even exist as a real entity, or are they an actual god of death running around fucking with people? Because if that's the case, and that is very much a possibility, then
What's the fucking point?
so, all of that to say, being depressed, or at the very least, extremely overwhelmed, makes sense in this situation. Luckily for Ryuzaki, I can help with that. Which brings me to today's sponsor, I'm sorry, I'm just fucking with y'all. This video is not sponsored by BetterHelp. I just wanted to see if I could transition that into an actual ad read. But anyway, after Ryuzaki finishes his spiel, Light chimes in, optimistically responding with,
But at this point, we have no way of knowing if that's the case. Cheer up, would ya?
which, if I'm being completely honest, that would really kind of piss me off. Like, oh, cheer up. What an idea. Why didn't I think of that? However, with that being said, that's the response I'd have if I was looking at it from Ryuzaki's perspective. Because when I look at it from Light's perspective, I'd actually be kind of annoyed with this. We actually get a hint of his irritation when Ryuzaki says,
I guess I just can't get past the fact that my deduction was wrong.
like, the way Light is looking at him, he seems pretty perturbed, and that eventually escalates into, well, give me a sec. So Ryuzaki goes on about how he just doesn't feel like trying anymore, and how he feels like it's ultimately a big waste of time, which, as we've gone over, I completely understand that viewpoint. However, upon Ryuzaki saying,
It's just a waste of time,
Light reaches his limit, and, well,
Ryuzaki.
Falcon!
so I love the fact that Light hits this man so hard that he also ends up sending himself flying by virtue of them being chained together.
Yeah, no, that really hurt.
Yeah, it was supposed to, my guy. This man was trying to United States of smash your ass with that one. But honestly, Light is pretty justified in cold clocking him like that, as he goes on to say,
You don't feel like doing anything, just because your genius deduction was wrong and I'm not Kira?
and yeah, that would also really piss me off, because bitch, I'm not Kira, and you're telling me that because I'm not Kira, you're upset? Fuck you. Light then goes on to chastise Ryuzaki for involving so many innocent people, as well as saying,
More importantly, what was the point of putting Misa and me behind bars?
and I really like the fact that he mentioned that, because that's the kind of reaction I wanted to see from at least one of them. Like, bitch, you lied to me for weeks while having me tied up in a cell, all the while I was begging you to let me out, and now you want to act like this? Bet. Oh, you finna catch these fucking hands, Ryuzaki. But besides that, something worth pointing out is the fact that Light just swung on somebody, which is not something I feel like the old Light would have ever done, but this innocent Light does not care and is ready to throw down if he needs to, and I dig it. Though, fighting against Ryuzaki might not be the best idea.
I understand, but still,
Falcon!
an eye for an eye, my friend.
Anyway, after the two tip the couch over, Ryuzaki attempts to explain again why he's so depressed, which ultimately leads to Light saying,
Besides, you should hear yourself. It's as if you won't be satisfied unless I am Kira.
and that's it. That's what it really comes down to. Ryuzaki knows that Light is or was Kira, and he won't be satisfied until he can prove that. And while that's fair, given the fact that he's right, it's also aggravating on Light's end because, you know, he doesn't know that he was Kira. But anyway, in hearing Light say that, Ryuzaki confirms that it's true, which in turn leads to another scuffle. And yeah, upon seeing old Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee continue to throttle each other, Matsuda calls the room to try and break it up.
Ryuzaki, I've got good news!
Misa Misa's #1 in 18 Magazine's reader popularity poll.
And look, I mean, he had to pull something out of his ass, and we can't exactly expect him to be as quick-witted as Light or Ryuzaki, so, I mean, give him a break, okay?
Matsuda's acting stupid again.
Well, that is his specialty.
Or not. Oh, fucking hell. Those guys are assholes, for real. That was just actually mean, but whatever, moving on. We fast forward 2 months and it looks like Light has stumbled upon something.
All of them were prominent Japanese businessmen. In just over a month, they all died of heart attacks. As expected, there's been a general downturn in the market, with the exception of Yotsuba.
Yotsuba. Where have I heard that name? Oh yeah, these douchebags. Looks like they weren't so good at covering their tracks, were they?
Looking back, there have been 13 similar deaths in the past 3 months.
I kind of like that they mentioned that because it lines up with what Takahashi said before about them meeting once a week. 13 weeks would equal a little more than 3 months, which is about the amount of time that passed between when Kira started killing again and now. Anyway, the two discussed the idea of Kira being someone who's secretly supporting the Yotsuba group, which, as I mentioned before, is definitely a deviation from the previous two Kiras. But yeah, with everything seemingly good between the two, Light ends up teasing Ryuzaki a little by saying,
Are you feeling a bit more motivated now?
And welcome back to how to use it. First up, the borrower of the Death Note will not be followed by a God of Death. The God of Death always remains with the owner of the Death Note. Also, the borrower cannot trade the eyesight of the God of Death. So this is nothing new. As we saw back in episode 14, Rim stayed with Misa even though the notebook had been left with a Light. However, I feel like they end up breaking this rule, or at the very least the bit about a God of Death always remaining with the owner of the Death Note, because I know for sure there's a point where Ryu just fucks off on his own for a bit, but maybe that'll be explained when we get there? I don't know. Regardless, this is a rule we're already familiar with, so moving on. When the owner of the Death Note dies while the note is being lent, its ownership will be transferred to the person who is holding it at that time. Now, this is a big one. Not necessarily at this point in the story, but it definitely acts as the crux of this particular arc. So, as much as I'd love to really get into this one, we're gonna have to hold off until we get to that point in the story. So, with that being said, let's move on. So things pick back up at Yotsuba, where the council is essentially stroking themselves off regarding how clever they think they've been.
This is starting to feel too easy. Look at all we've done and no one suspects a thing.
Our stock continues to increase, but we've kept it below the radar.
Are you sure about that?
And it's just funny because that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, I find it especially odd given the graph we saw, where it'd be obvious to anyone who's ever seen a line graph that one of these is not like the other. Also, I highly doubt Light was the only one who noticed this. Like, unless the stock market in Japan is vastly different from the US market, I feel like someone in that sector would have definitely noticed this trend. Not to say that they jumped to the conclusion that Kira was supporting Yotsuba, but if all these other CEOs were suddenly dropping like flies, then I'd imagine there'd be some news about it, especially considering people who are invested in those stocks would be hemorrhaging money as it starts to plummet. But anyway, one of the men, a guy named Hattori, raises a concern regarding the 3 deaths that were carried out last week.
Why did all of them die of heart attacks? I thought we agreed one would be accidental.
And this prompts a discussion between several of the members as they state that the reason that individual did not die the way they wanted to was because they had picked a specific location in Japan. However, the individual in question was, wait, where was he?
I hear he and his mistress were in Italy at the time.
Okay. Well, since he was living it up in Italy, there was no way he could die where they wanted him to, which is something we saw Light test back in episode 4. And so they come to the consensus that whenever impossible circumstances are written, the person will just die from the default method of killing, which is a heart attack. And then we get this line from one of them that basically just kind of tells the group that he's Kira.
It's just like I was saying last week. If you want it to look believable, request accidental death or disease, and Kira will always find the quickest way to make it happen.
And there's a lot to take away from this. For starters, the issue I have with this isn't so much what he's saying, but how he's saying it. Like, there's a certain level of confidence in his voice that none of the other members seem to have. Everyone else here is, at best, speculating as to what might have happened, whereas he's confident that if you request accidental death or disease, Kira will always get shit done. And one could argue that it's just his personality in comparison to the others, that it's just bravado or something, but this just feels like it's coming from someone who has a better understanding of how this actually works. Because this individual obviously hasn't told anyone about the notebook, so for everyone else, their understanding of all of this is very abstract. They know that Kira can kill, but they don't know the exact parameters of everything. And since this person doesn't want to be too forthcoming with information, they have to remain at least somewhat vague and just kind of casually throw shit out there and hope that the council pays attention. And that's another thing. That line about him bringing up this exact thing last week, it means that he didn't have enough clout to convince them before, which implies that they might not take this dude seriously, or at the very least, they might just not fuck with him. Because immediately after he says that, another member just says,
"Anyway,"
before changing the subject, which, at least to me, feels a little dismissive. But anyway, to wrap this portion up, this line also kind of speaks to his inability to make decisions on his own. Because at the end of the day, he has the final say on what happens. And even though he apparently told them they should just do an accidental death, he still went with what they decided, which kind of makes him seem ineffectual, because since you're the one with the notebook, you could have still done an accidental death, and when Hatori then posed that question, you could have just suggested that maybe something went wrong. You could have come up with anything. I mean, what are they gonna do if you decide to act on your own? Leave? You own them, bro. There's no leaving here. Hell, if anything, just by virtue of being here, all of them who aren't Kira are fucked. I mean, Namikawa said it in the last episode.
All of us are now frontrunners to become Yotsuba's next CEO.
And do you think the person holding the notebook is going to let anyone else take that spot? And furthermore, do you think any of the 7 men left would not immediately realize that whoever is the CEO after all of this is probably Kira? Especially if someone else from this group gets it and then they suddenly die? And hell, furthermore, do you think Kira would just leave evidence of his transgressions out there? Witnesses that could one day decide to turn on him? No, he would kill all of you to cover this shit up. So yeah, unless the owner of the notebook is killed or incapacitated or something, y'all are fucked. But anyway, Namikawa continues the conversation by saying,
"Quite frankly, if someone was able to trace the deaths of these people back to us, then he'd have to be a god."
A god, you say? A bit on the nose, but whatever. The scene ends with Namikawa saying,
"Besides, we've taken precautions."
I wonder what that's about. But yeah, anyway, we transition back to Task Force headquarters where we see the chief and Mogi strolling on in. Matsuda quickly greets them and tells them about Light's theory about Kira working with Yotsuba, and the chief responds knowingly, as if that was the missing piece of a puzzle he'd been trying to figure out.
"We just spoke with the director, and it seems Kira's offered bribes to a number of politicians."
And this shit is actually kind of insane. So apparently, by using the massive influx of money they've garnered via boosting their stock, they've been able to use said money to bribe the whole fucking government, apparently. Or at the very least, the people in charge of the MPA. Because that's apparently a thing you can do, which, you know what? Saying it out loud, that definitely seems like something you could do with enough money. But yeah, just like that, the NPA has been told that it can no longer search for Kira, which is definitely a shock to everyone there. It also means that the chief, Mogi, Matsuda, and Aizawa have a decision to make.
"If you wish to continue working this case, you'll have to hand in your letter of resignation to the MPA."
And that's a big thing, a colossal thing. While quitting their jobs would be the noble thing to do, it's not exactly as simple as that. I mean, nobility ain't paying the bills, or in some of their cases, putting food on the table for them and their children. And the chief is aware of that. So while he and Mogi have already made their decision to quit their jobs, he tells Matsuda and Aizawa,
"We all have our own lives, so think it over carefully."
That's true, Chief. Especially if you've got a family to support.
as the camera zooms in on Aizawa's panicked face, which makes sense because, as we saw earlier, things are not great at home. Not only that, but he has not one, but two young children to consider when making this decision. It's a lot. But anyway, Ryuzaki chimes in and tells them that they should not quit their jobs, and that while he's extremely grateful for all the work they've done, he feels confident that he'll be able to take it home from here. And he doesn't say it in any sort of dismissive way, but instead to just kind of let them off the hook, so they don't feel bad about having to prioritize their families over this investigation. Light also chimes in, stating that if nothing else, he'll be there to help too, given, well, he can't leave. But anyway, regardless of how Ryuzaki said it, the chief ends up saying that they're all personally invested at this point, and that they should have the right to choose for themselves, to which Ryuzaki agrees. And yeah, after some back and forth, Matsuda finally makes his decision, saying,
"Count me in! I'm gonna quit the police and chase Kira too, Chief!"
Which now means that Aizawa is the only one who hasn't made a choice.
Besides, if I stayed on as a police officer, I'd feel like a total loser.
Think before you open your mouth, Matsuda.
Right? Like, really though, Matsuda, read the room, my guy. Your boy is literally right behind you, stressing. Like, it's wild to me that he would be insightful enough to acknowledge that having a family might force you to consider sticking with the MPA, but then almost immediately after that, he makes this comment. Anyway, it's now that we see Aizawa enter his first stage of grief. I say his because while there are stages of grief, they don't necessarily have to follow a specific path, as we'll soon see. Anyway, the first stage for Aizawa is bargaining.
"Is there any way I could still keep my job and help you in my spare time?"
To which Ryuzaki makes it immediately clear that that ain't happening. It's one or the other, all or nothing. Ryuzaki then goes on to say that he doesn't think it's a good idea for Aizawa to burden his family by taking on all of this extra work, and that he should instead just stay with the police. The chief and Matsuda then chime in, assuring Aizawa that everyone here understands his situation and no one is judging him. And I believe that. I mean, how could they judge him? He's not leaving because he wants to. He's not doing it out of fear or self-preservation. He's doing it for his family, to take care of his wife and his children.
"But the chief has a family too."
Our situations are completely different.
And the chief is right. While their situations might seem the same at surface level, since they're both cops and both have a wife and 2 children, when you dig deeper, you find that their circumstances are vastly different. I mean, for starters, the chief is, well, he's a chief, and that comes with chief money. Furthermore, he's been doing this a hell of a lot longer than Aizawa, which means he's probably got a decent amount of savings. In addition to that, while the chief does have 2 kids, they're much older than Aizawa's. I mean, one of his kids is here working on this investigation, and the other is likely heading to high school soon if she isn't already there. It's not the same.
What kind of friend would I be to Ukita if I quit now?
Whew, okay, so that's heavy. Like, to us, Ukita was some dude we interacted with for a couple of episodes, really kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. But to Aizawa, and I'm sure the rest of the officers, he was a good friend, someone they worked with likely for years. So to have to give up on avenging him in order to take care of his family, it's just... it sucks. It really just sucks. But yeah, from there, Aizawa zooms right on into his second stage of grief, anger, which for him is not an emotion he's unaccustomed to.
"I became a detective so I could catch the bad guys, not run away!"
And I really love the delivery of that line. You can hear the frustration and anguish in his voice as he tries to reconcile with a decision he knows he has to make. It's just... and props to Trevor Duvall for his performance in this episode. And random fact, he also voices one of the Yotsuba members.
"Kira will kill that person using his default method, a heart attack."
Yeah, that's the same dude, which I found hella interesting because I feel like I'm pretty good at recognizing voice actors, and that one slipped right on past me. Anyway, it's at this moment that old Watani decides to jump in and drop some rather interesting information.
Ryuzaki, early on in the investigation, you specifically told me that if a task force member were to lose their job, I should make preparations to ensure that their family's financial future was secure.
And I love this. Like, Watani was just listening to all of this and was just like, what the fuck, man? Like, he knows what Ryuzaki is doing, and he's at the point where he's just kind of fed up with it. I especially love the added bit at the end when he says,
"I'm a little curious as to why you're withholding this information."
Like, Watani isn't stupid. He just doesn't want to see someone who's essentially been a ride or die since day one get messed with like this. Because, I mean, if it wasn't clear by Watani bringing this up, Ryuzaki is testing Aizawa, which really, if he wasn't angry before, he sure is now.
"I assume that was some kind of test to determine how committed I was to this task force."
And I love how the chief and Matsuda just pop in like, no, that's not what he's doing, that's not what he's doing. Only for Ryuzaki to be like,
"No, I was testing you."
And I mean, after saying that, all bets are off.
Fine then, I quit. Now I know this for sure. I've always hated Ryuzaki.
And I love the way he just spat that shit out. You can really hear the vitriol in his voice, and I dig it. Because honestly, screw Ryuzaki for that one. Like, just on principle alone, I wouldn't want to work with him anymore. That was just mean. The moment he started getting emotional like that, bringing up Ukita, you should have stopped him and told him about the money. Like, damn, man. And then it gets even worse because as Aizawa storms out, Ryuzaki responds by saying,
"That's too bad, because I like you, Aizawa."
And it's just... like, I want to say that he means it, that he does actually like him. Like, maybe that's just really the type of person he is, and he just can't help it. But anyway, before we wrap this scene up, I wanted to point out a fun fact, which is, Mogi did not speak at all during this entire scene. Just thought I'd point that out. So we transition to a new day, and it seems like the task force is making some serious headway, with everyone contributing to the investigation in significant ways. Or, well, almost everyone. We start with Light, who, as we know, was the one who originally looked to Yotsuba as a suspect. From there, the chief builds upon that theory, managing to notice a trend regarding the deaths.
All the deaths which are beneficial to Yotsuba are concentrated around the weekends.
Which is a really nice catch. From there, everyone starts singing his praises, with him ultimately saying,
"After all, the last thing I want is to be dead weight."
Dead weight?
Yeah, Matsuda, nobody wants to be dead weight. Anyway, immediately after this, Mogi strolls in with information on all of Yotsuba's employees. And, how many people is that?
300,000 people. That's amazing, Mogi.
Which... damn, Yotsuba is a big-ass company. I mean, I looked it up, and that's more employees than JP Morgan Chase, and only slightly lower than companies like Costco and Lowe's. But anyway, with everyone pumping each other up, Matsuda asks if there's any way he can contribute, and Ryuzaki is quick to tell him exactly how he can help.
"Could you get me another cup of coffee?"
Which is... damn, y'all be disrespecting this dude so fucking much. But honestly, I really like this whole little scene because it serves to foreshadow the events of the next episode. But we'll get to that more next time. For now, we end this scene by being introduced to the newest task force members.
My name's Iber. I'm a con man. How's it going?
I'm Weddy, and I'm a thief by trade.
And I really like the chief's response to all of this, as he instinctively objects to the idea of working with criminals, which, I mean, makes sense given his long history as a cop. Anyway, the introductions are relatively brief, but it's important to note that these two will have bigger roles as the story continues. But for now, we leave our new task force to check in on an old friend. So I mentioned in my previous video that this scene is one of my favorites of the series, and it's true. It's a short one, but I love what it shows us about the reality of all of this. It starts off with Aizawa in the park, sitting on a bench, staring up at the sky. I'd argue that this scene sees him entering his third stage of grief, denial, and I'll get to why I think that in just a moment. So he's sitting there, and all of a sudden his oldest daughter spots him while she, her sister, and their mom are walking home from the store. She runs up to him, and he's just kind of caught off guard by it, as his mind was clearly somewhere else entirely. His wife, Eriko, does not share her daughter's enthusiasm, which makes sense given the fact that, as far as we know, things aren't super great between them. Instead of being happy to see him, she instead questions why he's not at work. He responds to Eriko by saying he just got some time off work, which prompts his daughter to chime in and say,
"Is a time off a vacation, Daddy?"
And he responds with a smile, telling her that's exactly what it is. And this is why I would say that he's in the denial stage, because he goes on and lists the different things they'll be able to do now that he won't be working on the Kira investigation.
I can have a break every single week.
And he really wants to look at this as something good. He gets to be with the people that matter. Yes, avenging Ukita and bringing down Kira would be great, but this is his daughter, his daughters, and his wife. It's his family. This is what he should want. This is what he wants to want. But with each passing word, he finds himself shifting out of the denial stage and into the depression stage. And he just can't fake it.
Now I can go with you to the park. We can go to the zoo together, or the amusement park.
And it ultimately just cascades into him breaking down in front of his wife and daughters. A series first for any male character, by the way. And I really kind of love the fact that they showcase that grown men can cry too, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in addition to that, it's an especially powerful moment as it doesn't end with any sort of closure. We never get to see him hit that final stage of acceptance. What follows is up to us to determine. But if I had to guess, he probably goes on to be depressed for a while after this. In reality, he probably shifts between different stages throughout the next few weeks, because grief isn't necessarily a one-way road. It has twists and turns, and there are times where you reach the end just to find yourself back at the start again. But I think what I love most about this moment is how it shows us the reality of this entire situation. How one's convictions don't always line up with their circumstances. Like, it's great that the others have situations that allow for them to be the heroes of this story, but that just can't be the case for everyone. Things happen that are beyond our control, and it isn't always something bombastic or grandiose that gets in the way. It's not always life or death. Sometimes it's as simple as other responsibilities that cannot be ignored. And I respect the hell out of Aizawa for putting his family first. But yeah, the episode ends with his daughter asking her mother,
"Mommy, why is Daddy crying?"
And roll credits. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. If you liked this video, then consider dropping a like, and if you really liked it, then consider subscribing. Anyway, that's it for this time. Until next time, friends, peace.